Tonight is Wednesday, April 9th, and we're opening the Finance Board meeting. We have an agenda. We're going to skip the order to let Rebecca, our town administrator, go first and give her updates because she has another meeting to get to. And we have two more members that are waiting to attend. And we will also, again, officially welcome Kerry Goodwin as a new member of the board. We welcomed her at our last meeting, but she was Zooming in, so she's here with us tonight, so.
Thank you very much, and I apologize for not being able to stay the whole meeting, but thank you for
Not your
accommodating.
fault. When we booked it, you said you had a conflict.
So thank you. So I just wanted to quickly update the board. As you've probably seen, the preliminary cherry sheet estimates were released, and the governor just signed off on the budget today. So I put together the spreadsheet that shows you what the FY23 estimate was, the governor's proposal for FY24, the House proposal for 24, the Senate proposal for 24 conference committee, and then also the estimates that we had put together during our budgetary process. So you'll see essentially that we fared pretty well in terms of what we had estimated for the year. In total, we're expecting to receive about $9,000 more than what we had predicted. Most of that comes from the increase in the unrestricted governmental aid. We had estimated that we would get $860,000, and they had moved that up to $870,000. Excuse me. So with the combined monies that we had left on the table, if you will, from our budgeting process and, allocating for the revenue for Proposition 2.5, the override, et cetera, there's about another, I want to say, $1,200 that we did not allocate at the end of the day. We did not allocate all of the monies that we had assumed. So that together with the $9,000 will leave us with about $12,000 that were not allocated for fiscal year 24. So all in all, I think that's pretty good given the circumstances. That also means, unlike in prior years where we've left $60,000 to $80,000, we could have had a town meeting, we could have then had that monies then reallocated to certain needs. Where this is much smaller, that need doesn't necessarily come to fruition unless the board and the Board of Selectmen would like to call a fall town meeting to allocate those additional funds.
What would it cost us?
It would probably cost you about the same amount just to hold the town meeting, but still an option nonetheless. So I just wanted to give you that breakdown. The spreadsheet gives you more of the details and the numbers. The other discrepancy, again, falls with the elderly and veterans benefits. That came in 146 under what we had estimated. So all in all, it makes up to that 9,973 that you see there.
Wouldn't this be a general expectation, though? You would expect, you would budget as safely as you can, as realistically as you can, and hope that there is a little bit of a cushion in the budget that comes out. So wouldn't you expect, for me to have $10,000 not allocated and prepared to be part of our turn back in free cash is sort of as basically low as you could safely expect, don't you think?
I would agree 100%. I think that when the numbers become a lot larger, it becomes a disservice to the taxpayers because that revenue is already being generated and it's not being utilized to their benefit. But when it's small like this, I think it's just smart budgeting and it falls in line with giving you that, like you said, a little bit of extra cushion if something were to happen. So I think it, all in all, turned out to be great. But I know in former years you can leave on the table about like $100,000 or even more if you're a larger community. So that can be a little bit more of a just not as smart financial budgeting, and a town meeting should be utilized so that those funds can be utilized because it's not really like a pocket of monies that you're looking to set aside. Those monies should be allocated into stabilization and or other needs and not just sitting there and not capitalized or realized, if you will.
Okay.
Where did the Chapter 90, I didn't see it here, is that a separate pile of money?
Chapter 90 is a completely separate pile of money.
Okay.
We did talk a little bit with the school. If you also saw some of the press releases, they did increase the Chapter 70 aid. So instead of giving the minimum aid communities the 30 per student, they've upped it to the 60. In talking with the superintendent, that's not really going to actualize into much of a savings for the school. We're only talking about additional $60,000. So that doesn't really help us in terms of our assessment numbers. They also talked a little bit about the regional transportation monies that were coming through. And again, based upon the additional costs associated with fuel, et cetera, what was allocated isn't really gonna, again, give additional monies that the school needs in order to bring that number down. The only unknown at this point in time is the OSD figures, the OSD increase, the 14% that we talked about throughout the budgetary process. It doesn't look like the state has offered any money, but yet there were talks of putting monies aside to help accommodate for that large increase that we're seeing for the special education and at a school placements. But again, we haven't seen that update, so we're not exactly sure if there's additional monies that will be given to the communities to help with that expense. So while the aid numbers weren't awful, they also weren't really helpful either.
But the regional transportation, if they more fully funded it, at the end of the day, to say that that's just gonna offset the increase in gas prices, I mean, the increase in gas prices has already been budgeted. That was gonna happen no matter what. So the increase in the reimbursement has got to fall to the bottom line and be good news. Maybe it's not a huge percentage of the budget, but it's got to be helpful. That's going to come back to the taxpayers, no?
It's helpful, but it's not a substantial savings that's really gonna change the assessment much, more so just like we were talking before, $60,000 or so. When you talk about an OSD 14% increase, you're talking about $560,000 right off the bat. That's a larger sum of money, so any assistance towards that larger sum, if it's only $10,000, that's not gonna help you pay $560,000, but if it's a much larger sum, then obviously that's more of a savings and a financial relief. So I think it really
So
has
we'd
to
have
do
to
with.
look and see how much the regional transportation is, because that's one of the other things that they keep talking about. This goes up, we don't get reimbursed. This goes up, we don't get reimbursed. Now they're increasing the reimbursement. Well, that really doesn't matter. Well, it has to matter.
Yeah. Well, in the cherry sheet, you'll also see, at least, I know, again, more on the municipal side than I do the school side, but you'll look and you'll see that there's charges, and then there's reimbursement. So a lot of times too, you'll see that actually evens out at the end. So
yeah.
what you think you're getting in aid is really a cost on the other side as well. So I think that kind of works the same way with the school side of things, but again, that's really just an assumption based upon what I see.
I know the school is not you. I'm just finishing the discussion is all.
And so then I just had a couple of other items that I wanted to mention to the board. So we had our human resources review by the Collins Center. That was something that was initiated by Denise way back when, and it was a grant that was never utilized. So in talking with DLS, they allowed us through the Community Compact Grant to hire the Collins Center to help us with a preliminary overview of our policy and make suggestions in terms of what we needed to do to update that. They provided a lot of updated information relative to state law, so the Small Necessities Act, the Parental Leave, Family Medical Leave Act, and a lot of those statutory requirements that we had not yet updated in our policy. So I went through and I updated all of that and kind of took out all of the other items within the policy in a draft format so that we can be a little bit more flexible with how we address certain situations. They also provided template and language for grievance policies and things of that nature. One of the larger items is that they didn't necessarily talk more about our time off and sick, vacation, personal, etc. And we currently have a structure that is put in days, and we have moved on with the Harper's payroll system to calculate things in hours. And a lot of the times we'll see, there's a lot of requirements for taking sick time and signing off if you're using sick time to take a child to a doctor's appointment and things of that nature. So there's a lot of ways that sick time can be abused. And so in prior years, I think under Denise's quest to get this figured out, topic of PTO was brought into play, so paid time off, and that was explored with the departments, and a policy was put forward. It was never officially adopted. I think it was stopped at the Board of Selectmen. There was some back and forth on some of the specifics of that, and I think Lynn Stanton was also a big proponent of moving in that direction. So I know that exists, and we took a look at that, and so we came up with a proposal that will take into consideration combining vacation and sick time, moving it into hours and calculating it by accrued hours, by hours worked, and then also labeling it as paid time off so that it can be used at the employee's discretion, which is something that's done in the private sector quite frequently. So once that's finalized, we're going to give it to town council. Once town council agrees that that's good to go, we'll give it to the departments, and then it'll go before the Board of Selectmen for approval. One reason I think it's important to the finance board is there is financial liabilities associated with such in terms of salaries, costs, paid time off. There's a stipulation in the proposal that certain vacation time can be bought back after a certain amount of years of service so that it eliminates a large sum of money being paid out at retirement or when they resign. So I think that it will be a better way to manage that, but at the same time, there's some more upfront cost associated with such. So I just wanted to make sure the board was aware that that's something that will be also coming to you to take a quick look at. The regional agreement with the school, we have yet to finalize that. I had a meeting with the school the other day, and the town manager from West Newbury had mentioned he had assembled a memo, and so as part of that, they had made some recommendations for the regional agreement, something we've already talked about with this board. I know Sarah Sheehan McGrath was very passionate about that issue, so we can look back at the minutes and reflect some of that conversation, but I will be distributing to the chair that information that he provided to me, and at the next meeting, I would like if maybe we could put that on the agenda for a more formal discussion and input before it goes to the Board of Selectmen for their input. The trash and recycling contract, Selectwoman Castronellis has put that effort before the Board of Selectmen to create a committee. This is a very timely project to have before us, especially since we have about 2 years left in our contract. So one, it's good because we'll finally get to see exactly what the initiative is of reducing the barrels to the 2 barrels and whether or not we're making any impact on our tonnage and how that's impacting our payments. And how we're charged. And then also because we're going to be going out for bid, we kind of really want to see what other communities are doing and what costs we're up against. And so this committee will allow us to look at that a little bit more closely. And it'll be very helpful for myself as well to have a little bit more hands on deck to do some of that research and offering some insight into what works and what doesn't work.
When is the contract up with the present company?
2026, I believe,
A long way
or
off.
8.
It's usually a 5-year. So it's 5 years from now, we're going to have a committee now?
No, well, it's not 5 years, it's already in play, so there's only like 2 more years left in the
Oh,
contract.
that's what I meant.
I think it's 2 or 3. Yeah, 2.
Okay.
So it depends. I mean, I know that there's certain Board of Selectmen members who have talked about bringing trash services in-house, so as part of my research, I'm looking at how that looks and what communities have that and why communities that did have it have moved away from that, and looking at a deeper analysis of that and what
It's
other
a no-brainer.
expenses.
No one does that.
I was just going to say, does anybody do that?
I think there might be 1 or 2. Mostly it's in New Hampshire, not necessarily Massachusetts, but I know a few communities did do that and moved away, so I'd like to
Well,
use
I
them as
lived
a
in
case
Salem,
study
New
as to
Hampshire,
why.
and they don't do trash yet. You go to the transfer station, which I used to love. But, or you could hire privately, but that's about it. New Hampshire doesn't give away stuff.
And that's why I think it would be important to have that analysis as part of that committee. Like, what
Okay.
does it cost to
All
take
right.
it to transfer station? What does it cost for the homeowner if you were to privatize it and do it do it yourself? Or, so kind of take a closer look at that and have more time to discuss it instead of, contract expiring in 3 months. What you gonna do?
I have yet to see in this town a purple bag. And believe me, people aren't just sticking to 2 barrels, okay? So we pay
You
by
can come
that.
by my house, I use the
You-
purple bags.
Jesus, you're in the back of nowhere, okay? You're a dead-end street.
We still have a lot of traffic though.
I only use 1 barrel, so.
So it'll be a very interesting conversation, and I definitely welcome any of the board to provide additional impact and to stay informed on what's happening. And I'll bring back as much information as I can to the board, because I think that where this is one of the largest budgetary items that we have, and where we're expected to reach close to $1 million in that particular line item just to fund the automatic cost with expected tonnage, it would be important for this body to weigh in on that issue. I wasn't sure what the makeup of the committee was gonna
Yeah.
be. I know it was initially
Finance
discussed.
Board, Board of Health, the highway will be liaison.
Okay, so when you're making your suggestions in terms of the CPC as well as any board reorg, if potentially there could be a vote to nominate an individual from the finance board to the trash and recycling committee, that would be appreciated. And if you could just let me know who that is, I'll inform the Board of Selectmen. The last two things I have is that the capital improvement plan, we have some major items that need to be funded. Unfortunately, with the school debt, I don't think that it looks realistic to take out additional debt in the coming year. We're still not in a great position to do so, but we have some major items, like I had mentioned previously, with the roof on all three of these buildings, as well as the electrical panels. The electrical panels are outdated, and we're at risk of losing our insurance coverage based upon the fact that they're no longer covered. So those are very expensive items, and we're talking about all three of these buildings. So the PD, this building, town hall, and the library.
At the 20,000-foot height, about how many dollars below? At the height?
Just the roof alone over at PD is $600,000.
Awesome.
And that includes the
I'm
fascia
glad we
boards
have a
and all that other
selectman
stuff.
amongst us. So you think trash is the only problem?
So it's going to be something that I think we need to start talking about. We're the newer schedule that we put in place is that we start to talk about the capital plan well in advance of starting the budgetary process. I'd like to continue that. We haven't asked departments yet to add anything to that list, but again, those larger items should start to take precedent because they're not things that we can ignore, and we can't cover them with free cash, and stabilization is not enough, and to drain it just for one project is not sound fiscal management. So I think it's just something that we need to start talking about. I don't think it's something we'll be able to do this upcoming fiscal year in terms of funding and taking on additional debt, especially with our current ratios as discussed. But I do think that it's something that we need to start the discussion on. And that leads into the budgetary process. So we're going to be using a similar schedule as last year. We're also going to continue to have those joint meetings with the other communities in terms of the school budget. We're thinking about, again, doing one with their initial proposal and then another one once they finalize their budgetary information so that we can have that consistent dialogue with the school. The only other change is that we will be using ClearGov specifically for our budgetary process, which means that your budget books will now be electronic. They will not be in the binder form, so they will be updated by the departments through the portal, so their letters will be written on to ClearGov, their spreadsheets and what they're proposing for budgetary increases will all be utilizing that platform. We can make accommodations if there's certain sections you want to print out, but we're not going to be putting together the binder as we have in former years. And then the last item, I promise, is the annual report. So the 2022 annual report has been finalized. There's hard copies in my office if somebody would like a hard copy, and it's also available online. I'm pretty proud of the report. It's a little bit different than in former years. And it adds a little bit more about some of the grants that we've received and adds some more photos and is a little bit more involved to tell the story of what we've accomplished that particular year. And that leads us to the 2023 annual report, which I'm sending out to the departments to input, and this will also be using ClearGov. We will be using a digital format. The last year was great. I thought it was well received, but it takes a lot of time to do that, and I'm only one person. So instead of taking somebody's letter and just combining everything and throwing it into a book and saying, here you go, I took the time to format and color and add photos and try and, make it more of a showcase for the town. And so using ClearGov, we would be able to use that to do kind of the same thing without having somebody just solely focus on it themselves. So they'll be able to, the formatting will all be taken care of them. It's just taken care of. It's just them inputting the data. And it really falls onto the departments. And I think this is big for the finance board because the departments are ultimately responsible for showing you what they've accomplished that year. So the time and effort they take into putting that information out there and the data that they choose to share above and beyond what's required will really be up to that department. And kind of like we do with the budgetary process, they'll be there to show you why they need additional funding or what they've been able to accomplish with that funding. So hopefully that will be well received by the departments, but it is a little bit more of an additional lift, and hopefully it will give some new perspective as to what we want to be sharing with the public and the residents, especially during these hard fiscal times.
Where is that 2022 annual report on the website?
Yep, under annual reports, we have them all listed, all the way back to
It's a good
2017.
spot for it, the annual report section.
We do.
Just want to make sure it's easily accessible for everybody that may want to go look at it, because, you know, a lot of work went into it, and I think it would be a good thing to review. So
Now,
thank
those
you.
budgets will be able to be printed, I can print them, right?
Yes, we can definitely do that. The same with the report that we had done for town
It
meeting
won't be a
as well.
screenshot, it'll be a real report.
Yes, we can print out a
PDF.
copy if necessary.
I'll defer to the
If
expert.
necessary or when necessary.
Okay.
But those are just some of the updates I wanted to share with the board, and then again, specifically in terms of the cherry sheet numbers that were released by the state. So I don't know if there's any additional questions I can answer in the interim, or if anything comes
Anyone
up,
have any
obviously.
other questions?
Good job.
Rebecca has 3 minutes to get to the library. I need a book. I need to go over there. I have book club next week, and I haven't even taken my book out yet.
Talking trash,
Mhm.
is that contract up
In about 2 years.
2 years? Now, there's a 2-barrel limit,
Yep.
and we get charged by the tonnage.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get the charge by the tonnage, what's my incentive for adhering to the 2-barrel limit?
Well, if you give them 2 barrels that the town owns, that will be how it would work. That's what most towns do. Haverhill has a 2-barrel limit, because you have to get the barrels from the city of Haverhill. West Newbury has a 2-barrel limit.
Amesbury just did it. Amesbury just.
You can buy
did
an
theirs.
extra barrel, but it costs a few bucks, not a few, like 100, 200. So, we should have done that the last time and leveraged
What?
West Newbury, okay? Because
The
they
two
know how to
barrels,
do
one
their
is a barrel
homework.
and one is recyclable.
Well, it's not just that, but we're asking the Fox to
Don't get into this, we're not like them, okay?
watch the hen
Yeah.
house, right? There's really no incentive on a monetary perspective for them to enforce that, because the more they pick up, the more they can charge. So,
But if you give out 2 barrels with a serial number on them, they can't do more than the 2, okay? Then they can go to Mellows with and pay and get rid of it.
right, but we're
Gotta get
2
to
years
that
away
point.
from that right now, so
Yeah, well.
what's the solution today? I don't want to think about 3 years from now. 3 years from now, I'll be broke.
I haven't yet to
right?
see a
Is there
purple
a,
bag.
is there a solution to, enforcing that somehow, some way, so that the tonnage reduces?
So in initial conversations with Selectwoman Castronellis, as we've gone through, and the idea of assembling the trash and recycling committee is to take a closer look at that specifically and take a look at the numbers specifically to see what the tonnage has done over the course of that time span as to when that barrel limit came into play. And then it's also to engage Roy Boyer and the folks over at Waste Management and give them a rundown of what we're seeing, and essentially state that we don't believe, or we do believe, that the limit is being enforced by Waste Management. There's times where I know that there's been, certain bags ticketed or boxes ticketed that, they leave a ticket and they say they won't pick it up because it doesn't meet whatever, and they cross it off on their list. But I think that what we've been hearing is that in terms of a barrel limit, a bag limit, that's not necessarily been the case. And so we would like them to enforce what it is that we put in place. And so I think that there's a way for us to do that by having conversations with Waste Management, but having educated conversations as to showing them how it's not being enforced, not just saying that it's not. So I think the first step is with the committee that Selectwoman Castronellis wants to put together is to get that data, look at that data, and then arrange that meeting right off the bat and start that right away.
Yeah, because that's one of the variable costs you can control, just to a degree. Some are fixed costs, you're just going to pay cottage charges and things like that, but, if you can somewhat control the tonnage, that's huge.
Very important.
All right.
You want to go? Hold
I mean,
on. 1 second,
Rebecca
Kathy.
knows this as well. We did look at the tonnage after implementing the 2-barrel limit, and Reggie, but we did see a reduction from, remember when we were in COVID, we saw that pandemic spike in tonnage, and that was a big concern. There was definitely a reduction, but then, I think it was May and June, I saw another spike.
Yeah.
Not as bad, we're not going up back to where we were in the pandemic, but,
Now, what we,
it appears that the dumpsters that we thought were outside our tonnage, it's a good probability that they are not outside our tonnage. And if they're not secure, then people can dump in those. And that, in the springtime, with the parks open and people moving homes and things, that might be part of what's going on.
yeah, no. What would be interesting to find out is, does that decrease correlate with the time that people started going back to work?
No, it decreased correlated with the reduction of 2 barrels.
Thank you very much.
But, it was not like huge, but there was a reaction. People did, and there is some pretty good, follow through, but there are homes, you can see one, you drive by and they're not complying. And we don't, like you said, we did not give them the barrel, so it's up to the truck driver to determine, that it's a 232-gallon barrels, 164.
Yeah. Now, from what I remember, from what I recall in the discussions, nobody's giving these barrels away. There's a cost to it.
I think there is, that's what the committee will look into. If we can get that accomplished, if we know for sure that we're gonna go out to bid, which seems like the right. Microphone. Oh, that's, I'm so sorry.
You can use Rebecca's. Rebecca had to leave for another meeting, so you can, okay, or you can use that one.
Okay, so, is this thing on? Yes, thank you. So, right now, the enforcement is pretty much on the driver of that truck.
There's only one driver.
Right.
I mean, he's got enough to do.
Well, thank you. I think you kind of said it. Nobody in town, we don't have a staff person in town to drive around and tag things. I know in the communities that have given, provided the barrels to their residents, then there's a strict adherence that in Haverhill, the top has to shut, none of this,
Right.
and no piling things on top. And I know from speaking to the West Newbury Board of Health that the driver, there's only one driver, one person on the truck does not get out. If the barrel's too heavy or something's wrong, that barrel doesn't get picked up. It's totally automated.
Right.
Yep. And so when I
They do
compare,
trash and recycle all in one truck.
I compared our contract to their new one that they just got and kind of prorated the customer base, because they have fewer customers. And it looked like our contract, as we know, was okay in the first 3 years, but now with the escalation in the fixed charge, because that's where we asked them to put it, because we couldn't afford it when we were putting that contract into place. With the escalation in the fixed charge, we really need to get the tonnage down to get the savings, because we do pay less per ton in the next 2 years than West Newbury, because Waste Management has its own facility, so we don't pay, I think it's called a tipping charge, I don't know. There's some fancy words than trash. But suffice it to say that we have a lower per ton rate, but we do have several dumpsters around town that I believe are not secured. It becomes pretty easy if you have some overflow not to buy thank you for buying the overflow bags, but, and then some people are saying, where are they? Where do you get them? So we might need to do some more PR as well. It seems that we maybe need to keep a steady reminder out there of what this is about, that it's not trying to take a service away from our residents. It's seeking to be able to afford that service without any additional overrides. And
So
everybody-
that's,
yeah.
the committee's been created, and we're going to be seeking one person to join that committee.
Yep.
Annie's going to talk briefly about a housing plan committee.
Yep.
Part of a Merrimack Valley planning thing. We have the Community Preservation Committee that is seeking a finance committee member, and we also are going to be voting to reorganize this committee for a new chair, vice chair, secretary for this fiscal year. So all those positions are open.
What about vice chair?
Did I say chair, vice chair, and secretary? I thought I did. And so Annie, while she's still here, she's going to tell us a little bit about the committee that she's seeking.
Sure.
Contr-
So as Ruth mentioned, I have been working with the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission to update our housing production plan. It's a plan that we update every 5 years. So ours, I believe, is up at the end of this year of 2023. So we've been working since, I believe, January to update that. It is a lot of data collection on the Merrimack Valley's planning commissions, MVPCs, and right now they kind of took a summer hiatus, but the stakeholder meetings that we've been having, you know, there's myself, Rebecca as our town administrator, Sam Joslin, our building inspector and zoning enforcement officer. There are a couple folks who are involved with the Council on Aging who are present to, you know, represent that older population in Groveland who I've heard in many different formats, you know, they're having a hard time staying in Groveland. There's a resident who works closely with Habitat for Humanity who's on the planning team right now. So it's essentially the housing production plan is a roadmap for Groveland as far as the production of housing, and what that would look like as far as types of housing, locations of housing, and things of that nature, what the community needs. And it is my opinion, and MVPCs, and, you know, just makes sense that the finance board might be interested in something like this. As far as, you know, the revenue that's generated through additional housing and just kind of what the makeup of the town looks like with additional housing. And so like I mentioned, MVPC took a bit of a hiatus on the meetings for the summer, so they're doing a lot of data collection right now. And we will be picking up those meetings again in September, so just next month. Prior to our little hiatus, we were meeting the first Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. here in Town Hall. I'm sure we can work out arrangements to do remote if that would be easier for people. But yeah, I don't know if you have any questions about it. Again, we're not even close to draft format yet. But yeah, we're looking for, you know, as many people who want to help us out with that as possible. Yeah. Oh, and I should mention, sorry, this is also going to be looking partially, not fully, at the MBTA zoning regulations that were passed about a year-ish ago, I think. I can't remember anymore. So it's in, you know, that's also being analyzed in this as well. It's not going to be the focus of this. The housing production plan, like with our comprehensive master plan, there are certain things that need to be in it. And so those things will be in there. But the MBTA zoning, many communities in the Merrimack Valley are having to comply with that. So it's certainly going to be a section within our plan.
So with you involved with the Merrimack Valley planning involved, there are staff people to do more the data collection, the data analysis. You're looking for the community involvement for just community involvement. You're looking
Correct.
for
Opinions.
opinions.
Essentially, yeah. So, and we'll also be doing a full community outreach session that will probably be in the late fall, early winter. So you guys get my emails, you'll be getting more of them about various things. So you'll get those emails. We haven't solidified a date for that yet. We're still getting that together, but yeah, we're looking for input. You know, one thing we discussed at one of our earlier meetings, we took a look at the old housing production plan and compared it to right now. And, you know, did the goals that were set forth in that plan come to fruition? Are there any goals from that original plan that just don't make sense for Groveland anymore? Things like that. And so moving forward, you know, one of the areas that was identified for potential housing was over on Route 97, kind of near the light department, that area. And, you know, now, I don't know if that makes as much sense. You know, that new gas station just went in there. You know, there's an application with the zoning board right now at that intersection with School Street and Salem Street for contractors units. So that's the type of thing where it's like, maybe that doesn't make sense anymore, and let's update that for the next plan. So.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
So, so there's those two committees, there's community preservation that if anyone has any questions on, that Jim can speak to. But I think that first we should probably reorganize this board. Does that make sense to everybody?
Sure.
So, so I'll start. I am going to start by making a nomination that Melissa Baker serve as our next chair. And that's really primarily because Melissa has been on this board for, I'm going to say
4 years.
4 years, and has really been an active contributor, a very independent fact finder, researcher, and has been diligently taking notes for the last couple of years as well. So to me, being the longest standing member aside from Jim, and Jim's already served as chair, it to me makes the most sense. So that's my nomination.
If she'll accept it, I'd like to second that motion. I think she'd be an excellent choice.
Yes.
I'm willing to do
Move it.
whatever's needed, so.
So that's been seconded by a couple people. So I'm going to say, is there any further discussion on that? No? So all in favor?
Anybody on Zoom?
There's nobody on Zoom tonight. It was in case one of us couldn't make it, and
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Our condolences.
What's next?
now what do we do? Do you oversee the rest of them, or do I finish? Yes? Okay.
Boy.
You're the boss now.
My job just came to an end.
Oh, man, it's right there. Jumps right in. Okay, so then I guess I'll take over now.
Do you want me to take the rest of the notes
If you would like to, sure.
until we have a new?
You
Do we
can
have a new
take,
secretary and then hand it down?
if you, yeah, she's still got to finish
So I guess
tonight.
then, the next position to look to under the reorganization would be the vice chair. Don't know if anyone has any recommendations that they would like to make. I don't know how many people,
You want to be it? No?
if there's no one else.
What?
Vice chair.
Vice chair, any recommendations?
If nobody wants it, I'll step up. I mean, you know, it's only really to fill in your absence for the most part and kind of be your right hand.
Bill can step up. I don't mind stepping up as vice since I have done it. Whatever. I'm fine with whatever.
Me too. So,
All right.
whatever.
I make a motion that Bill O'Neill be the vice chair.
I will
Is there a
second that.
second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
And then, any discussion? And a vote? All in favor?
All in favor?
Unanimous?
Yeah.
And the next would be the secretary. There's anyone who would like to make a motion
Or any
on that
comments?
part? I don't know. I know, Ruth, you've done it in the past.
Who's a really good, diligent note taker?
I think it should be on one page and that's it. Refer to the streaming.
I've done it for several years. Before I was chair, I did notes. Actually, I'm going to say for 5 years, because I did that up until I chaired. So I'd rather not do it again right now. I feel like I've done it. I feel like I have a job that for me is more than full-time right now. So I would
Can we,
rather.
can we table that until the next meeting?
Yeah, I'll finish today.
All right, I'll motion to table voting on a secretary until our next scheduled meeting.
Yeah.
Can we get a second?
Second for Alex. discussion? All in favor of tabling until the next meeting? Unanimous?
I think Castanellis would be a good secretary. She's always on her laptop.
I can't remember what they said the last 10 minutes.
I'm just pulling up the agenda.
I'd be like, blah, blah,
I have it
blah.
Do you have it?
Well, so we need to, yeah. The other items are the community preservation representative, the town planner, and the trash. We could talk about if anybody wants to do
Mine
those.
doesn't need to be a formal vote. It's not like the CPC or, you know, it's not kind of the housing production plan stakeholder meeting. It's not a voting body. There's no decisions being made. No.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so if,
Okay.
you know, I have a couple people from the Council on Aging, they show up when they're available, and they don't when they don't. So it's nothing very formal. Just
Sounds really cool if it wasn't 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd
I know.
love it.
That's
But-
why we're doing the larger scale, like, that's gonna be, you know, after hours, here at Town Hall, with PR, you know, things of that nature. It's gonna be much more interactive.
Did you say it's once a month?
Yep.
I guess if we just kind of go down the list, the next one we had on the list was Community Preservation Committee. And I know at the last meeting, we had asked people to look at what their availability was. The requirements were kind of when the applications were due, and then when it was to make a decision as to which ones would be supported in advance of the town meetings. We don't know if anyone has had the opportunity to evaluate.
So that's not a particular day, time, like consistent?
Do you
It's
know?
just whenever it's,
Or Jim used to
It's
do
u-
that.
It's usually at 7 o'clock, and yeah, the meetings aren't structured with a calendar. There's usually no more than 3 meetings, maybe a fourth. So, but they are random, but they usually start around 7.
and the day can change too? It's,
Yeah, well, it's been by history Tuesday or Thursday.
okay.
Mike, who's the chair, would reach out and say, which date do you prefer? It's a little loosey-goosey that way, but that's the way it's been working. Are you still interested?
I'm interested, yeah, I can't do Tuesday evenings. That's my only problem.
Well, why don't we do this?
We can table that one too and get
Find
more
out with
feedback from Mike.
Mike will be here. We have Concom at 7, so Mike Dempsey's the chair, or has historically been the chair of the CPC, so if you want to chat with him, he'll be here.
So I'll make a motion to table.
I can second.
You're interested in taking serious.
Any other discussion? All in favor of tabling
Till next meeting.
till the next meeting? Unanimous?
Trash?
So then, for the Trash and Recycling Committee,
I'm gonna send you the spreadsheet, of everything and anything on it, and I'm gonna send you right now the contract, which you can give it to them.
sure.
They shall give me everything. Don't imagine that committee's going to have to be, honestly. It's pretty cut and dry. But I think it needs to have some semblance of a committee to get through. And then basically Rebecca's gonna bring it home for us. You know, because we're not gonna go out to bid. The whole purpose of the committee is to get some input from the community, there'll be some community members on it, and,
So, I know Bill has an interest in doing that, so I'll make a motion for Bill to serve as a member of the Finance Board for the Trash and Recycling Committee.
and here are the items on,
Okay.
so you can.
I'll second that.
follow in session, right, so it's not a violation of the meeting.
Okay with that?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've got a history with it, and you know what? I kind of think that we could use the data that we're collecting in order to give us some leverage in the next bid.
It's an actual committee that they need.
But what I just did is, I sent the Excel sheet to you, so you
Yep,
can send it
and I'll
to them
distribute them.
now, while you're in meetings, right? Because you can't do it outside meetings.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't go to quorum.
No, like if you send,
Yeah.
give it to them now.
Yep.
just
Oh, you want it to go to everybody as opposed to be a follow-up item just to
while
Bill?
you're in a meeting, because it's like being handed out, sort of, digital. And I think it's the contract I attached. If it's not the contract, I will get you that. Too many pieces of paper. The Board of Selectmen is in charge of the last contract. Can you imagine? And moving the whole place.
Well, we had an interim also in charge of
Well,
initially.
he started it, yes,
Oh, yeah,
but he left
Mr.
before we concluded.
KP.
And that's as much as you can say.
Next.
You got it, right?
She's
Yep, I
just
got it.
sending that.
I'll send it to everyone. So that was forwarded. So there was the motion, was there a second?
Yes, I seconded.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? So the next.
The one thing that we skipped
Uh,
was the study group. I don't
The
know if she's
chapter
going to make
70.
an update. And then we've got meeting minutes and our next
Yep,
meeting.
so the next item on the agenda was the Chapter 70 study group. I don't know if you have an update that you want to give, or,
Oh. It ran away?
So, as you heard from our town administrator, they tell us, oh, we're giving you $30 more per student. So think of it this way, we have like 2,100 students. Do the math. What's $10 more per student? $21,000. How big a budget is it? What is Groveland's operating assessment of that budget? Was it, 10 million? What do we have to come up with on last pass? Like 10, right? We roughly have a town budget of 20 million, right? The school accounts for about 60% of our budget, 65%, right? But there's the capital that's in the debt exclusion, right? So I'm talking the operating, what we have to afford under Prop 2.5. And I keep going through these worksheets online from the, it's DESE, it's the Department of Education and Elementary and Secondary Education that's in charge of this calculation, unfortunately for us, because the calculation doesn't work well for a regional district. So what's happened is both Merrimack and Groveland's assessments, minimum contributions, are based on a combination of our increasing valuations, a percentage of that, and what they perceive to be increasing income, and a percentage of that. But in West Newbury's case, they had another rule that said if it was 82% of last year's something or other, then you get capped. So unfortunately, we have an inequity within the district in the way the formula is applied. It's applied using one methodology to Merrimack and Groveland and another methodology to West Newbury. And I mean, from everything I've read, that was not the intention of it. The intention of the whole Chapter 70 process was to determine a foundation budget for the school. What would we like the school to have, right? Then to determine within that community, what should they be able to pay towards this, like a city or town. And it would be just that one calculation, and then they would fill in the gap, if there was a gap, with Chapter 70 aid. So you can imagine when you try to take that now and apply it with regional districts, how crazy it can get. In some cases, it might work fine. Everybody might be treated the same way, but in our district, our little 3-town district, this is not the case. And you can see the spike in the minimum contribution for Groveland and then the reduction in West Newbury's, and that's what the first pass of the assessment puts on us for our assessment, and then we're assessed on student percentages. So the concern would be, what would we say if, like, what would the financial board say if you ever got an assessment that we had 39% of the students. What if our assessment came in at 42% of the operating budget? How would you feel about that? We're right now at 39% more or less, which is what we have as a student share. But it clearly doesn't reflect our ability to pay because we had to have an override to meet that. That's not taken into account at any point in this formula. Okay, so my very real concern is we're up at 39% of the budget. We're paying 39% of Merrimack schools, West Newbury schools, our school, and the common school, 39%. What will we say if it goes to 42% and we still only have 39% of the students? Is that fair? Could that happen? I think it could, the way this is being done. Yes. So the point of the study group is to try to, and we're pretty much at that point, we've taken it about as far as we can and come forward with a message to, hopefully to the DESE, to say, you need to take this into account. You need to explain to us how you're going to control this and ensure that our town is treated fairly going forward, that we don't end up paying 45% of the budget when we only have 38% of the students, right? You know, if you want to look at it that way. When we first started in the region, yes, we were paying a lower percentage than our students, but that was all understood because of ability to pay, you know, within the tri-town district and merging all three towns. Now I think we're kind of, with the override, we've reached the ability to pay our percentage share based on students. Okay. Should we have to pay more? Why? Because they've made some rules up for a formula that goes across like 40 columns before it arrives at an answer. You know, it's just ludicrous. And that's the bottom line of my research, is that this formula is ludicrous. We're not going to be able to change it. I'm a realist. But I do think if we can point out where it's not working correctly in a regional district, in an instant like ours, if we can get in the ear of somebody and say, this is a problem here, us, because of the differences in the three towns, this is how it's falling out, we need to have some attention to this. They might be able to do something to facilitate us.
Is there a plan to present this to our state legislatures and say, you know, can you help us address this inequity that we have within our school district to, you know, have, everybody has, you know, an equal share, as opposed to, you know, one town carrying the you know,
Right.
the majority of the weight.
Right, so that's the goal, is to bring back to the full Board of Selectmen. We called it just a study group to allow people to just drop in uninvited, if you wish, you know, whatever. Say your piece or ask a question or look at something and give some input. And we'll probably meet one more time to go through everything one more time, make sure that we all agree. This is not sensical. This doesn't make sense for our district, and this is why. And then go to the Board of Selectmen and, you know, perhaps a letter from the board to our state representatives asking them to facilitate a meeting. I think it will need a face-to-face, and I think we have the town administrator that can handle that. You know, she's got a lot on her plate, but she's very effective in meetings.
Good. Well,
Yep.
I've witnessed
So,
it.
Yes, right. So when we present that to the full board, we'll give you all the same information. There's just too much of it right now. I don't want to dump a load of sheets, because when you go to the website and you start to look, what you'll see is, if you try to look up just Groveland, you'll see nonsensical data for our minimum and zeros, because they can't do the calculation for a singular town if you're looking at the overall foundation budget. You'll see a foundation calculation and all that for Pentucket, but not for the individual towns, because it's not designed for this. It was designed for a city, a standalone city or town, one place. What can they afford? how much aid do we have to give them? And yes, I agree too that the fact that I think using valuations is absurd, because we all know our home value goes up, but we don't have any more money, and the town doesn't get any more money from us. The tax rate goes down. It's capped at 2.5%. So, yeah.
I've dug into some of the formulas, so it's definitely
Right.
interesting trying to.
Well, right, so prior to this, the reason this didn't probably hit us so badly before was they were mainly using the municipal revenue growth factor, which is a Department of Revenue calculation, which you all know because it reflects new housing additions. It's our growth, it's our receipts and our housing growth. And they were, bumping up the minimums by that amount. And then they did this whole new thing. And it was sort of implemented within the pandemic period, unfortunately, while we were all busy worrying about a lot of other things. And, we saw the impact of it on last year's budget. I think, Ruth, you can speak to the fact that you had studied it from within the pandemic when we're supposed to be allowed to use pandemic money to meet the new minimum. Yeah.
And that was when we had to take $250,000 out of stabilization because they took it back after they told us that they were using that money. And that's really what started this whole
Slide.
side.
And I still have the letter from them saying, yeah, that, you can use the, what was it, ESSER 2 money?
ESSER 2
Yes.
money.
So we go into the next budget year, coming up soon,
Yep.
with the same answer. We'll have to do an override again.
No, not necessarily. I mean, because if you look at, again, we're going back to the spreadsheet that Ruth originally did, which showed that year when we went and voted in a budget for Pentucket, assuming we were going to be given a reduction in our assessment of $250,000 from their ESSER money. So our assessment was reduced $250,000 on our town meeting warrant. So we didn't vote that money. And then during the summer, the legislature, whoever votes all this, unvoted it. And Pentucket came back and said, what can you give us? And we said, basically, only money from stabilization and not much. So they needed $250,000, and I believe we gave them $111,000 maybe towards that, towards our share of it. We did not give them the full $250,000.
Yeah, we did.
No, we did not. No, we did not. We did not have it. We gave them $111,000, and I don't know whether they filled the gaps with their ESSER funds that year, but it just, you can imagine now this deficit rolls forward. And then,
Anything that's filled with.
right, and then the
ESSER
next year, there
funds.
was a bigger override
Don't have
request.
that
So
money.
the first was a $250,000, and what was the first override that failed? That was bigger than
It was
$250,000.
like 800.
Was it
I
800?
think it was like, it was in the, I think it was like
Okay,
eight.
so we went from 250 to 800. That failed, they made cuts. Parents were unhappy. So now the override goes from 800 to $1 million.
To 1.25, yeah.
Right, but because we passed that, we should have a moment in time to catch our breath, I would hope.
I would hope.
We should,
I
but
mean, no, because we were behind it on the other budgets going up to that. We were always.
Behind it for 3 years.
Right.
Correct. We knew we were not going to be able to fund the budget. It was an ongoing problem.
right, but you still have to be careful. I've been watching that they've been adding administrative positions.
Yep.
Not teaching positions, not special ed positions, administrative positions, which is just 100% overhead.
Right?
Now, in a tight budget, most companies don't add overhead. School districts, it's adding overhead in a tight budget season. You have to question that logic.
Well, we'll have to look at that line item in the budget. You can see the administrative costs, and the special education, they do get reimbursed part of that, a good portion of that.
Education is education.
It just lags a year,
Overhead is,
is overhead.
is, I absolutely differentiate the two.
Well, I would envision that we will have, as we did this past year, those successive meetings So I think the first question to ask then is to see the actual budget with the actual Chapter 70. See where we're starting from. That would be my recommendation. Don't go off of the budget that they gave to us at the time of the town meeting, because we vote the assessment. We don't have any control of the line items. Okay, and I don't even know, the school committee, do they have line item vote? Do they have to vote each thing that changes? I think they might.
No, because when
As long as the
when the
total-
override failed a year ago, they just voted a new budget,
A number.
one number, and then
Okay,
they,
okay. Okay, so we would want to know.
Execute their recommendations within that
For this
budget.
school year, what do you have in place? Yeah, that would give us a good starting point. And then when they propose the new budget, you want to see apples to apples. Yeah. I mean, even if they added administration, they can't increase beyond what the school committee voted on that day in March. That's a legally binding vote. That total number is a legally binding vote. They can move things around, but they can't go above that number. And if they got additional aid, technically, we should get a lowered assessment.
You think that's the way it works, huh?
It-
Okay. I'm the optimist, too.
I know, I doubt it with the small amount, they're not going to, I mean, if they lower, it, they'll just take it back twofold. I mean, if it was more like a $500,000 of additional aid, I would say, yeah, let's get that back, because they did give it back other years, when the Chapter 70 came in bigger. It is supposed to be an offset to what we get assessed. So,
thank you.
Yep, thank you. So I think the next item
Oh,
was
sorry.
approval of the minutes. And I had distributed the May 10th and July 12th minutes.
Yep. Move to approve the May 10th, 2023 minutes
May
as
10th and July
noted.
12th.
And July 12th, yes.
And July 12th, 2023. I'll do them both, sure. We can do a group.
So we have to do them, we have to vote separately because we didn't have the
Okay.
same board at that time.
So May 10th,
So
2023.
we'll start with May 10th. I know, Ruth, you had sent over just
Minor
two
edit,
minor edits, just a time.
time start,
Time start at the top of the page, and then instead of
and a bad
saying-
autofill.
And a bad autocorrect, where instead of saying vacant, it said vacate.
Yep.
So, there's a motion
Did
for
you
the
make the
May
motion?
minutes.
Motion to approve as amended.
I will second that.
And for second, any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor, I know Carrie, you weren't at that part, so, or part of the board at that time, so. All in favor? Jim? Okay. So, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1 abstain.
Motion to approve July 12th, 2023 minutes.
For a second,
Second.
Jim or Carrie will second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. And then I think.
Was that Jim? Did you second that?
Jim, yep.
No. Big Jim.
Oh,
Conservation meeting.
not quite yet. They meet at
So
7.
it's going to happen here, though?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Thank you. That's okay.
We need new
The next
members.
thing. So the next item on the agenda is just to plan the next meeting. You know, like we spoke in the past, we generally have the third Wednesday of the month set aside for that, so that would be September 20th.
That works for me. I won't be in Yellowstone quite yet.
Yep, yep, yep.
So,
Fine with me. I like structure.
I know
so-
you do. I know you do. I'm so sorry that the last two didn't quite work according to plan. I appreciate you, Jim.
It's important that we have a schedule like the Board of Selectmen. and
I know,
the other
but
boards.
do you
I
understand
understand.
that sometimes
I'm
there's.
not picking on you. I'm just saying, it should be a preset date and time.
So then we will go with September 20th, and then at that meeting, I will bring a proposed schedule for the rest of the year, including the budget
There you
season,
go.
so we can plan accordingly.
What a chair, congratulations.
Yes.
Madam Chair, may I bring up one thing? Is it possible we can move the meeting a little later? I don't work from home. It's tough sometimes with the traffic to get home. I mean, even the baseball game started at 5:45 to give you a little extra little time to, get there in case of the traffic. Could we possibly push it back a little bit?
How about
Most of the
6?
boards meet at 7:30. 6 is good. At 6, great. I love it.
I can't do anything later than 6.
6 would be enough that I don't have to,
Yeah, there's generally the Conservation Committee after us at 7, so we would just have to make
Stay
sure
on
we
point?
stay on point.
yeah, we push them back.
I don't have any objections if that works for everybody else, if it's easier.
That works for
Keep me
me.
from getting a speeding ticket or, something more stupid.
You'll have to consider,
During the budget
Budget
season, however, we
season.
usually bump them up to 5 because it's a longer block that we set aside to meet with every department.
I'll figure it out, but that's just a short period of time compared to the whole scope of the year.
and during budget season, we're also trying to accommodate the staff
The
who
staff, yeah.
have been here all day.
No, I know.
And so that's the other reason.
Okay, so then that's all set, and then the last item is if there's anything else that anyone has that we weren't aware of at the time of posting. Going once, going twice, everyone's good? Okay, and then,
Motion to adjourn.
At 6:43.
I will second that.
and then, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. All right, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.